Fred and Ethel Mertz, the wonderful renters next door on I Love Lucy, are one of the most famous couples in TV history. But there was something wrong behind the laughs. No one saw the strain, and there was a cold silence between takes. The anger started early and never went away. We finally know what was going on behind the scenes after all these years. William Frawley was completely hated by Vivian Vance. You're about to learn a reason why that is darker, edgier, and much more personal than anyone thought, the ideal pair on TV. 1951 was a turning point for American TV. ABC has a new show on the air. What was it called? I Love Lucy. And it was the most popular show on TV very quickly. Family after family met in front of the TV every week to watch Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz, Vivian Vance, and William Frawley bring to life one of the most important ensemble teams in the history of sitcoms. Lucy Ricardo and her crazy redhead husband, Ricky Ricardo, who leads a Cuban band, were the center of the show. But right next door, something just as memorable was taking place. People quickly fell in love with Fred and Ethel Mertz, who were the Ricardos' owners and best friends. Fred was the tight-fisted, often grumpy former vaudevillian who always had a scowl on his face. He had a sarcastic and patient wife named Ethel. She was quick with a comeback and an eye roll, and she was always down for Lucy's latest plan. Fred and Ethel Mertz were America's second pair, and people loved them. Together, they added a layer of comedic grit and grounded contrast to the main couples. They were played by stars William Frawley and Vivian Vance, who both have decades of experience in the business. William's deadpan timing made Vivian's emotional energy more balanced. With one raised eyebrow, she could get in a funny line. With one dry comment, he could bring down the whole scene. They weren't pretty, but they were real. You could have thought they were friends or family who fought over everything but still loved each other. There was clear chemistry between them. The grumpy grumbling from Fred and the cutting sarcasm from Ethel worked. They were giving performances that set the standard for what a comedy sidekick could be like. Even more importantly, they helped lay the groundwork for the whole genre. Back then, most TV couples were polished, perfectized versions of American family life. Fred and Ethel were different. They were more real and approachable. Because they fought, planned, and called each other out all the time, they were liked. The chemistry between them looked great on video, but as time went on, we saw that the kindness and teamwork we saw on TV stopped as soon as the cameras quit rolling. The strain that was building just below the surface was never shown to the public and wasn't talked about for decades. There was a working relationship on TV that looked easy, but it was actually one of the most widely tense ones in TV history. But in the early 1950s, no one knew about any of that. It was a huge hit, that I Love Lucy. It was even the most watched show in America by the end of its second season. It stayed in the top 3 for almost the whole 6 seasons. In those days, more than 10 million homes watched every week, which was a huge amount. And Fred and Ethel were very important to that success. They weren't just side figures, they were a part of the magic move. Vicky was the first actress to win an Emmy for Best Supporting Character in a TV comedy, which made history in and of itself. Because of how she played Ethel Mertz, comedic actors who didn't look like typical leading ladies were able to get jobs. She wasn't as pretty as Lucy, was older, and didn't feel bad about being herself. On the other hand, William Frawley gave the show a bit of an old-school grit. As someone who had worked in both theater and Hollywood BM movies, he gave Fred Mertz a stinky charm and a worn-out edge that people loved. He didn't have to say much for a scene to work. He only had to show up, frown, and say something sarcastic. In many ways, he was the perfect example of a grumpy sitcom husband before it became a cliché. Both of them were very dangerous when put together, but in more than one way. Still, everyone saw success in the first few years of I Love Lucy. The show changed everything about sitcoms on TV. It was taken in front of real people, using 3 cameras, which would later become the standard in the business. It was the first TV show to be shot on 35mm film, which meant that the scenes could be kept and shown again. It even talked about pregnancy, which wasn't common at the time. In an episode that drew over 44 million people, Lucy gave birth to little Ricky. Fred and Ethel were right in the middle of everything. They kept the Ricardos' crazy pranks in check with their dry wit and realistic middle-aged views. It was a great match. The laughs kept coming. People loved the show, but they had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. People talked about Fred and Ethel at home. People watched reruns of the show for decades without understanding that the two actors were so nervous that they could hardly stand to be in the same room. It looked like they were a great old married couple, but when the cameras went away, there were no more secrets. During the golden age of TV, stars didn't talk about their bad habits in public. Studios looked out for their stars. The tabloids hadn't yet made every fight between cast members into big news. Things that were making Vivian and William angry stayed hidden for a while. Fans learned that the truth about Fred and Ethel was very different from what they thought as the years went by and news stories came out. What began as stress at work turned into full-on hatred over time. Vivian Vance didn't just dislike William Frawley, she hated him completely, and we'll soon see why. In the background, from the first day of filming for I Love Lucy, it was clear that Vivian Vance and William Frawley's relationship would be more unstable than anyone thought. It all began with a comment, one line, that would make people angry for years to come. This was the first table read for I Love Lucy. The group got together to go over the script, find a rhythm, and get a sense of who they are as people. The people in the room were still getting their bearings, but Vivian was worried even in those early stages. She wasn't afraid to say them either. The story goes that Vivian, who had been open about being skeptical about being cast with someone 22 years her senior, joked to someone nearby that William looked old enough to be her father instead of her husband. She didn't tell him that. She didn't yell it, but it was loud enough. William heard her and will always remember it. William fought hard for the part and had something to show after being ignored in Hollywood for years. The comment made him look bad in public. He was a very old-fashioned actor who grew up in the rough-and-tumble world of theater, where honor was important. His mind told him Vivian was rude to him before the first scene was even shot. That was the end of the relationship for good. William was said to have hated her from the start. His language toward her was sometimes private and sometimes not so private, and it was not at all professional. One of the most famous was later in the show's run when he is said to have called Vivian that miserable cunt. The quote has been used in many different ways over the years. The exact meaning may have been lost over time, but the anger behind it has not. There was a clash of personalities and a dislike. Vivian also didn't hold back. She thought William Gruff was stuck in the past and unwilling to change. He wasn't very willing to work with others, and he didn't like practicing much. He was known for hitting his targets but staying out of the way, and he didn't like being told what to do or being corrected. Vivian, who had been on stage many times and knew a lot about timing and structure, thought his behavior was rude and disrespectful. Their characters and the way they worked together were very different. Vivian was right on. She liked to practice a lot. She went over her scenes and made them better. William, on the other hand, liked to do things just once and be done with them. He came from a time when people laughed and moved on. He didn't have time for artists who wanted to work on a line. There was also the matter of drinking. Frawley is said to have never shown up to work drunk, which was a strict rule set by Daisy Arnaz. People knew him as a big drinker everywhere he went. She knew it, Vivian. She didn't like it. Because they were different ages and Frawley worked in a certain way, she felt like she had to take more of the weight in their scenes. Both of them didn't like each other. But William showed his dislike more often. He would make fun of Vivian's looks, the way she acted, and even her voice behind closed doors. He made fun of her, rolled his eyes at her notes, and insulted her without thinking twice when he felt like it. Meanwhile, Vivian tried to stay away from him whenever she could. She often let the team know that she didn't feel comfortable around him. Even so, it's amazing that they never let it get on the screen. Even though they were angry with each other, they behaved like professionals when the red light came on. As Fred and Ethel, they gave clean, smart, and funny performances. The audiences had no idea what was going on. In fact, their fight off-screen may have made their relationship more exciting on-screen. The stress made their talk more interesting. It was funny to be sarcastic. They didn't have to fake the snark, side-eye, and dry comebacks. No matter how much they didn't like each other, they never messed up the work. They were on time, said their lines, and never skipped a beat. They knew that the show was bigger than their fight in many ways. They both benefited from the fact that I Love Lucy was a huge hit with people all over the world. They didn't need to like each other, they just had to keep coming back, and they did that for 6 whole seasons. The split never went away, though. It stopped being about what was said and more about what was never settled. The anger turned into stone and the stress turned into metal. There were no peace talks or olive trees. During the whole run of the show, they never got close or even friendly. Offset. They talked when the script told them to. That was it. There were no warm backstage moments or happy memories of rap parties. There was only cold professionalism held in place by a dislike of each other. William never forgot what Vivian said at that table read, which was the reason behind everything. He took his anger with him to the grave. But the fight wasn't just a private matter anymore. More and more people heard that there was trouble between the stars as the show became more popular. The cast and company knew what was going on. Ball was aware of it. I'm sure Desi Arnaz knew. As the seasons went on, the anxiety became part of the show's mythology. Fans talked about it behind closed doors while laughing at the lines. The most interesting part? People in the room never saw the cracks. People still liked Fred and Ethel Mertz. A grumpy but loving married couple who fought like pros but always found a way to make it work. It was different when they weren't on TV. Even after the show was over, their dislike would come back to haunt them both, especially when a new chance came up. A chance to get Fred and Ethel back. A follow-up show. The follow-up. I Love Lucy was coming to an end by the late 1950s. It was clear that the show's golden age was coming to an end after 6 groundbreaking seasons and the switch to 1-hour Lucy Desi Comedy Hour specials. But CBS officials and Desilu Productions weren't ready to let go of everything, even though Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz were getting ready to leave the Ricardo spotlight. One idea was quietly getting support behind the scenes. It was a spin-off about Fred and Ethel Mertz, the Ricardos' neighbors. I thought it made sense for the network. A lot of people liked Fred and Ethel. They had their own personality. They were biting, funny, and realistic. And most importantly, they showed a very different side of life than Lucy and Ricky. The idea of what life might be like for a middle-aged pair juggling work, marriage, and money without the Ricardos was one that had not been fully explored yet. Desi Arnaz, who was always a director and businessman, saw a chance. Several years ago, he talked to Vivian Vance and William Frawley about having their own half-hour comedy based on their I Love Lucy characters, but with them in the lead role. It might have been a big break for both of them. The offer was a treat for William. He was getting close to 70 years old and no longer worked in movies. He knew that the success of I Love Lucy had given his business a new lease on life. A spin-off meant more work, more money, and more attention. William did not seem to be someone who would turn down a good paycheck. He almost right away said yes, but Vivian didn't. She didn't even think twice about it. Her answer was a clear and firm no. Vivian couldn't stand the thought of working with William on another show, especially one where they would be on the same level every day. So she could watch I Love Lucy, which was a huge hit. She put up with William. And because Lucille Ball stood by her, she did have a choice now, though. Nothing made her blink as she turned it down. She said something. She was no longer Ethel Mertz. She was no longer Fred's Ethel, though. Being turned down hurt a lot. From William's point of view, it was a betrayal. He finally had the chance to have his own show. She was taking away the lead role, regular pay, and the attention because of her. The woman he had hated for years was now blocking what he thought would be a great chance to boost his career. So the fight got worse. Whatever chance there was of getting along again was gone. Desi Arnaz made the offer in good faith, but after Vivian turned it down, he reportedly gave up on the plan. There would be no sitcoms with Fred and Ethel or a second act for the Mertzes. Instead, their last scenes together were kept in the other Lucy Desi Comedy Hour episodes. They were still funny, still very sharp. Behind the scenes, though, everyone knew that their relationship was only for business. There was no longer any chance of working together again. We now understand why she hated William Frawley so much. The story doesn't end here, though. The last blow, the I Love Lucy phase, was over by 1966. William Frawley was having a quiet life in Los Angeles. He was never in good shape, had begun to get worse. He was almost 80. William had a heart attack on March 3 that year, while going down Hollywood Boulevard near the Knickerbocker Hotel, where he had lived for a long time. It was too late for the nurse from a building close to help. William was found to be dead at the age of 79. The death was in the news, but the honors were not heard. He didn't have any kids or a wife. His tightest relationships had been at work. Many of them were hard to understand. Hollywood never stopped for him, except for one brief moment. There were a few short obituaries and polite nods to his work as Fred Mertz. One story, There was one reaction to his death that would last longer than most of the public news coverage. Vivian Vance said it. Several people close to the production say that when she heard that her co-star from I Love Lucy had died, she raised a glass and said, "Champagne for everyone." Also, it wasn't a joke. It wasn't said in a funny way. From what I've heard, it was a real party. The picture did not show the moment. There was no red carpet or interview, instead only a quiet drink with friends at her home in California. The story stuck, though. It became one of the most talked about stories in the history of great TV over the years. One statement that said it all about one of Hollywood's worst feuds going on behind the scenes. Vivian never denied saying it in public. In fact, in the years before she died, she allegedly told people how much she hated William. She is said to have told him more than once, "I really hate him and I still do." And there's no room for doubt, and there's no attempt to make it less harsh with qualifications or professionalism. Vance made a lot of people laugh as Ethel Mertz, but she had a grudge that lasted longer than her most famous part. It stayed strong over time. Over time, that champagne toast became a story in its own right. Some versions of the story say that Vivian was having friends over when she got the call and she got drinks for everyone. In others, she said it in a cold, final way and left it at that. The specifics change. But the quote itself has been used in many places, such as cast bios. Desilu Productions has done retrospectives and conversations with people who worked there. Some former studio workers have tried to play down the event. According to them, it was either overstated or a joke that wasn't meant to be taken seriously. Others, especially those who knew Vivian well, have backed it up over the years, saying that it was in line with how she spoke about Willem's name. In an interview from the 1980s, an unnamed friend of Vivian's said she hated him. It wasn't because of differences in politics or personal traits. It didn't go together at all. There was a Cold War every day on set. Because of this, when William died, the war stopped, which was good. In 1979, Vivian would die of bone cancer, 13 years after she was born. In the last few years of her life, she talked about her time on I Love Lucy in a number of interviews. She said nice things about Lucille Ball, hailing her as a true friend and a great comedian. Her work made her proud, but she never changed how she felt about the man who played her husband. In the end, she thought he was mean, angry, and hard to deal with. While the man behind Fred Mertz may have made other people laugh, Vivian never found him funny. She only found him mean. The business, on the other hand, never tried to make things right. The fight was only shown in old scripts and reruns in Hollywood. There were no public meetings or tell-all interviews with both sides. It's possible that was best. Fans still believe in Fred and Ethel when they watch I Love Lucy today. They see the fights, the charm, and the unwavering loyalty. The slurs, insults, and years of private anger are not heard by them. In spite of this, there are times when the truth is clearer than any joke. The effects of a love-hate relationship. William Frawley and Vivian Vance were both welcomed into the Television Academy Hall of Fame after their deaths in 2012. This was decades after the first episode of I Love Lucy aired. Their work on I Love Lucy was an important part of American entertainment, and even though they were angry with each other off-screen, their effect on screen was undeniable. Fred and Ethel Mertz were well-known figures in American history. They were known as TV's most famous neighbors for generations. But their style was copied, remixed, and praised in a huge number of comedies that followed. Everyone agreed that they were the models, and the acts that made them come to life were based on real skill. Vivian was one of the first supporting actors on TV to really show different sides of a character. She was funny, expressive, and smart, but she wasn't just an easy stereotype. She could carry a scene, make a joke funnier, or keep a story from getting too crazy. In 1954, she got an Emmy for her role as Ethel Mertz. She was the first person to ever win the award for Best Supporting Actress in a TV series. William was a great comedian, even though he was known for having a tough exterior. Years of show business and early movies helped him get good at timing, and he gave every line a simple, honest feel. There was a deeper lesson in their story, though, than just their working success. They were angry with each other for years, and they never got over it or forgiven each other. The anger followed them long after the show stopped. It's a reminder that having ability doesn't always mean getting along with others, that even the best partnerships can have problems, and that great performances don't always come from having good relationships. Even though they sometimes come against them, their impact is bigger than the feud because people kept watching. It kept playing over and over. New fans found I Love Lucy through DVDs, streaming services, and TV shows that were already airing. The laughing never stopped. Even people who later found out about the stress behind the scenes still liked what Vivian and William did together. Finally, Vivian Vance and William Frawley didn't need to get back together to leave a mark. They had already done it. With each sarcastic jab, eye roll, and perfectly timed joke, they built something permanent, something bigger than themselves, that people still talk about today. When you watched I Love Lucy, did you ever notice the signs of their split? Share your thoughts below.